The sound of the judge's gavel still echoes in my head. Case adjourned. Next hearing in 60 days. I remember gripping the edge of the wooden bench so tight my nails left half-moons in the varnish. My ex-husband, Jake, stood a few feet away, clean-shaven, polished suit, that fake calm smile he'd perfected. The same smile he used when he told people we were just growing apart. He nodded at me before leaving the courtroom, like we were old friends who'd just finished lunch. And in that moment, as the door closed behind him and I heard his laughter float down the hall, something inside me snapped. That was the day I realized patience can be its own kind of revenge. Outside, the air was cold, sharp enough to sting. I remember the smell of coffee from the courthouse vending machine, the weight of the folder in my hands, filled with every proof I had of being a good mother. And still, none of it seemed enough. My lawyer, Denise, whispered, "We'll get him next time." But next time had already been 3 years of hearings, continuances, and lies that turned my life into a courtroom script. Jake made it look easy. He'd walk in, shake hands with the bailiff, joke about his new job, talk about his stable home environment. Meanwhile, I was scraping to afford daycare, juggling 2 part-time jobs, and trying not to cry when my daughter, Emily, asked, "Mommy, why can't I live with you all the time?" I didn't have an answer that wouldn't break her heart. 3 years earlier, I thought I'd married my best friend. Jake was the kind of man who could talk his way out of anything. When we met, I was 27, working at a local bank. He was a charming IT consultant who brought me coffee every morning just because you look like someone who forgets breakfast. I fell for it. Hard. We got married a year later. And for a while, life felt simple. Until the day I found a message on his phone. It wasn't even hidden well. A text from Mark Jim. That said, "Last night was amazing." I wish I could say I confronted him right away, but I didn't. I rationalized, doubted myself, even convinced myself it must have been some kind of joke. When I finally asked him, he just smirked and said, "You always overthink things, Sarah. Maybe that's why you're so tired all the time." That was the beginning of the gaslighting. By the time Emily was 2, I was a shadow of myself, doing everything, begging for his attention, defending him to friends who'd long stopped believing his work trips. The night I found the hotel receipts, it wasn't anger I felt, it was relief. Like the lie was finally giving me permission to breathe. I left him that week, packed what little I could fit into my car, and drove to my sister's apartment. I thought leaving would be the hardest part. It wasn't. The real nightmare started when Jake filed for custody. He said I was emotionally unstable, that I was neglectful, that my work schedule made me unreliable. He even claimed I had an alcohol problem, because I'd posted a photo from a friend's birthday holding a glass of wine. I remember reading those words on the petition and feeling my throat close. My own husband, the man who'd cheated, lied, and abandoned us, was now painting me as unfit. And the court believed him. At least, enough to let him have shared custody while I fought to clear my name. I spent months documenting everything. Every pickup time, every missed call, every message where he forgot to bring Emily to her doctor's appointment. I became my own investigator, part mother, part paralegal, part emotional punching bag. People told me to move on, that the truth would come out. But the truth doesn't shout, it waits. And that's what I learned to do. Wait. Watch. Prepare. Because the day would come when Jake's perfect facade would crack. I didn't know how yet, but I promised myself. When it did, I'd be ready. That promise became my fuel. My silent revenge. By the time the 3rd year of hearings began, I was no longer the trembling woman who'd walked out of our marriage with nothing but a suitcase and hope. I was calmer, colder, focused. The pain hadn't gone, it had just learned to stand still. It was during the 4th custody hearing that I realized Jake wasn't just playing the system. He was enjoying it. He thrived on the attention, the sympathy, the way people leaned in when he said things like, "I just want what's best for my daughter." He'd come to court with his new girlfriend, Alyssa, sitting right behind him. Perfect hair, pastel dress, pretending to be shy, but making sure everyone saw her whispering to him between sessions. I remember the way she looked at me, like I was the problem, like I was the crazy ex he'd warned her about. If you've ever been betrayed, you'll understand this. The hardest part isn't losing someone's love. It's realizing they're rewriting the story of your life while you're still living it. Every time Jake spoke, it was like watching a polished performance. He'd sigh, shake his head, talk about how Sarah's always been a bit emotional, or she means well, but parenting is stressful for her. The courtroom would go quiet. The judge would nod slightly. And I'd sit there, my hands trembling under the table, knowing that if I reacted even a little, it would prove his point. That's how manipulation works. It makes you look guilty for defending yourself. After the hearing, I sat in my car for hours. The air felt heavy, my chest tight. I scrolled through old photos on my phone. Emily's birthday party, her first day of preschool, the time she fell asleep on my chest after a fever broke. Every picture was proof of the mother I really was, but none of that mattered in a courtroom built on paperwork and perception. I remember thinking, he's winning. And that thought burned more than anything else. Then something happened that changed everything. 2 weeks later, Emily came home from Jake's with a small bruise on her arm. I tried not to panic. I asked gently, "Sweetheart, what happened?" She hesitated. "Daddy got mad because I spilled juice on the carpet." It felt like the world stopped spinning. My instinct screamed to call my lawyer, the police, anyone, but I also knew what Jake would do. He'd twist it. Say I was coaching her, alienating him, trying to poison the child's mind. So I documented it. Every mark, every word, every date. I started keeping a hidden notebook, something I never told anyone about, not even Denise. I called it the record. In it, I wrote everything. Times, locations, behaviors, screenshots of messages where he forgot to pick Emily up or where she said, "Daddy's girlfriend told me not to talk about things at home." At first, it was just a way to stay sane. But slowly, that notebook became my power. That's when I started noticing patterns. Jake always acted perfect in public, parent-teacher meetings, neighborhood barbecues, even at Emily's school recital. But when he thought no one was watching, his mask slipped. He'd get irritated easily, snap at Emily, ignore her, or hand her a tablet just to keep her quiet while he scrolled through his phone. One night, when I came to pick Emily up, I caught a glimpse of Alyssa standing in the hallway, tears in her eyes. She tried to hide it, but I saw the fear there. The same fear I used to live with. That's when I knew Jake's charm wasn't just a weapon. It was a shield. And sooner or later, he'd turn it on her too. Denise called me the next day with an update. "The judge wants a parenting evaluation. It's standard. But if we play it right, it might work in your favor." That night, after Emily fell asleep, I opened the record again. I stared at all those notes, 3 months of quiet pain laid out like evidence. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a victim writing down her suffering. I felt like a detective building her case. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. About proving once and for all that patience wasn't weakness, it was precision. Jake had no idea what was coming. He thought he'd broken me. But really, I was just getting started. The day of the parenting evaluation, I woke up before dawn. I couldn't eat. I couldn't even finish my coffee. My hands shook as I buttoned Emily's coat, trying to act normal, like it was just another school day. But it wasn't. It was the day a stranger would decide if I was a good mother. The evaluator, Dr. Miller, was calm, almost too calm. Her office smelled like lavender and paper, soft lighting, kids' drawings on the wall, the kind of place designed to make you let your guard down. Jake was already there when I arrived. Smiling, of course. Always smiling. He greeted Dr. Miller like an old friend, then turned to Emily. "Hey, princess," he said sweetly, kneeling to hug her. "Daddy missed you." I stood there frozen. He hadn't called her in 3 days, but now he was playing the doting father in front of a psychologist. When Dr. Miller called us in separately, my heart pounded so loud I could barely hear her questions. She asked about my routine, my relationship with Emily, my goals for her. I answered carefully, choosing every word like it was evidence in a trial. But what really stayed with me was when she asked, "Sarah, how do you and Jake communicate?" I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "We don't," I said quietly. "He communicates through the court." Later, she spent time observing Emily with both of us. That's when the cracks started showing. Jake couldn't stand not being in control. When Emily picked a toy he didn't approve of, he frowned. When she talked about staying at Mommy's house, his jaw tightened. He didn't realize Dr. Miller was watching every flicker of irritation. At one point, Emily dropped her juice box and gasped, waiting for his reaction. She froze like she was scared. Dr. Miller saw it too. She didn't say a word, just wrote something down on her clipboard. I'll never forget that tiny detail. The way Emily's eyes darted between us, searching for safety. That was the moment I knew I was done letting fear control the narrative. A week later, I got a call from Denise. "The report came in," she said. Her tone was careful, measured. "It's good." Dr. Miller noted concerns about Jake's temperament. It's not definitive, but it gives us leverage. Leverage. It wasn't victory yet, but it was something to hold on to. When I told my sister, she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You're getting closer," she whispered. But Jake must have sensed the shift too, because suddenly he started playing dirty. He began sending me long, manipulative emails, pages of fake concern and veiled threats. "I know you're struggling, Sarah. Maybe Emily would be better off staying with me full-time until you get back on your feet. Or, I'm willing to forgive you for dragging this out if you agreed to settle privately." He wanted me to break, to lose control, to snap so he could point and say, "See? I told you she's unstable." But I didn't. Not this time. I saved every email, every text, every passive-aggressive comment. He made it drop off. I documented everything like it was my second job. Then one night, around 11:30, I got a text from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but you should. I'm Alyssa's friend. She's not okay." My stomach dropped. I replied immediately. Within minutes, I learned that Jake had started isolating Alyssa the same way he'd done to me. Cutting off her friends, controlling her money, monitoring her phone. I didn't know whether to feel pity or anger. Maybe both. That night, as I sat in bed rereading the messages, I realized something. Men like Jake don't change, they just find new stages. But this time I had the script. I knew the moves. And I wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time in 3 years, I smiled. A small, quiet smile. Because I could see the ending coming. Not the kind that leaves you broken, but the kind that makes you whole again. A week after that text from Alyssa's friend, I couldn't focus on anything. I'd sit at my desk at work pretending to type, but my mind was back in that house, wondering what Emily saw, what Alyssa was enduring, and how long Jake's mask could stay on before it cracked. That's the thing about abusers, they're predictable. They always overplay their hand eventually. And Jake was about to. It started with a message from the daycare director. She called one morning, her voice low, hesitant. "Sarah, I'm sorry to bother you, but is everything okay at home? Emily's father came by yesterday to pick her up even though it wasn't his day. He said there'd been a schedule change, but our records didn't show one." My stomach turned cold. "Did you let him take her?" "No," she said quickly. "Something felt off. I told him we'd need written confirmation from both parents." He got angry, raised his voice a little. We had to ask him to leave. I thanked her, hung up, and just sat there shaking. Jake was getting desperate. That night, I added the daycare call to the record. I didn't even cry this time. The fear had burned itself out. What was left was focus. Cold, clear, calculated focus. I emailed Denise right after. "We need to file an incident report. He's escalating." She called me back within the hour. "Good move," she said. "We'll include this in the next hearing. Keep everything documented. You're doing everything right, Sarah." But what really hit me was what she said next. "His mask is slipping. Don't push it. Just wait." Wait. That word again. The one that used to feel like punishment now felt like power. A few nights later, I got another message from that unknown number. Alyssa's friend again. "She wants to leave, but he's threatening to take her car if she does. Says it's in his name." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't know Alyssa anything. Part of me wanted to ignore it. She'd been complicit after all. She sat in court while he lied about me. She smiled while he twisted the truth. But another part of me remembered what it felt like to be trapped, terrified, doubting your own sanity. So I wrote back. "Tell her to call me. I won't judge. I just want her safe." 2 days later, she did. Her voice was small, trembling. "I'm sorry," she said before anything else. I didn't know what he was capable of. I believed him. About everything. I listened as she told me stories that sounded too familiar. How he tracked her location, made her quit her job, accused her of cheating whenever she spoke to another man. "He said you were unstable," she whispered. "That you hit him once." I laughed bitterly. Of course he did. That conversation changed everything. Because Alyssa had something I didn't proof. She'd saved screenshots of his messages, recordings of his shouting, even a video where he threw a glass at the wall during an argument. She sent them to me that night. When I opened those files, I couldn't breathe. It was like looking at my own past replayed through someone else's phone. But more than that, it was evidence. Solid, undeniable proof of his temper, his control, his cruelty. For the first time in years, I had something that wasn't just my word against his. Denise's reply came at midnight. "This changes everything. Don't tell anyone. Don't confront him. Let me handle it." The next court date was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Jake showed up as usual, pressed shirt, confident smirk. But something about him seemed different. There was a flicker of unease behind his eyes. Maybe he sensed it, the shift in power. The quiet confidence in the way I sat, the way I didn't look down anymore. When the judge called our case, Denise stood up with a calmness that scared me a little. "Your Honor, before we begin, I have new evidence to submit." Jake froze. As Denise handed over the files, he tried to speak, but the judge raised a hand. "You'll have your turn, Mr. Turner." That was the first time I saw fear on his face. Real fear. That night, when I tucked Emily into bed, she asked, "Mommy, are you happy?" I smiled. "I think I'm getting there, sweetheart." Because deep down, I knew the tide had turned. The man who'd lived like nothing happened was about to learn what patience really looked like. Me, standing in the same courtroom he once owned, watching his lies finally unravel. And this time, I wasn't scared of the outcome. The courtroom felt colder that day. Maybe it was just me, or maybe everyone could feel the tension. Jake sat at the defendant's table, his jaw tight, eyes flicking toward me every few seconds. Gone was the easy grin, the confident posture. He looked like a man finally realizing his luck had run out. Denise stood beside me, calm as always. She whispered, "Don't react, no matter what he says." I nodded, clutching the record in my lap. My lifeline. 3 years of pain distilled into facts and timestamps. The judge began by reviewing the new evidence, Alyssa's recordings, the threatening messages, the daycare incident. Each file that played was another layer stripped from Jake's polished image. His attorney tried to object, claiming the recordings were taken without consent. But the judge wasn't having it. "These materials show clear behavioral concerns," she said flatly. "The court will consider them relevant." Jake's face turned red. I could see him clenching his fists under the table. He hated losing control. When it was his turn to speak, he tried to fake composure. "Your Honor, this is being blown out of proportion. My ex-wife has been on a smear campaign for years." Denise interrupted, calm but sharp. "Mr. Turner, are you suggesting the daycare staff, your girlfriend, and your daughter are all part of the same campaign?" That line hit like a bullet. The courtroom went silent. Even the judge looked up. Jake opened his mouth, then shut it again. I remember the sound of my own heartbeat then, steady, unshaken. 3 years ago, I would have been trembling. Now I sat still, watching the man who'd once controlled every part of my life unravel under his own arrogance. After the hearing, I stepped outside, the afternoon sun hitting my face like warmth I hadn't felt in years. Denise walked beside me. "We'll get the ruling in a few weeks," she said. "But I can tell you right now, things are looking good." I just nodded. I didn't even cry. I was beyond tears now. That night, I put Emily to bed and finally allowed myself to exhale. She curled up beside me, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Mommy," she mumbled sleepily, "you're not sad anymore?" I brushed her hair back. "Not anymore, baby." But as soon as she fell asleep, I got another text from Alyssa. "He showed up tonight. He's furious." I called the police. They told him to leave. My stomach sank. I typed back, "You did the right thing. Stay somewhere safe. And keep every message." Because even though I wanted to believe the worst was over, I knew men like Jake don't accept defeat. They retaliate. 2 weeks later, the ruling came in. I was at work when Denise called. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the smile. "Sarah," she said, "you got primary custody." For a second, I couldn't breathe. It didn't feel real. Then it hit me all at once. 3 years of courtroom battles, sleepless nights, humiliation, fear. It all came flooding out. I walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and sobbed like I hadn't in years. But this time, it wasn't out of pain. It was release. Jake would still have visitation rights, but under supervision, strictly monitored by the court. His perfect world was collapsing, one ruling at a time. A few days later, he showed up at drop-off, sunglasses on, trying to act unbothered. He leaned close and whispered, "You think you've won? This isn't over." I looked him dead in the eye. "No, Jake. It's not over. It's just no longer on your terms." He flinched. And for the first time, he had nothing to say. That night, I opened the record one last time. Every page was filled. Every lie documented. Every scar accounted for. I didn't need it anymore. But I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It wasn't just a notebook. It was my proof that I survived him. I slid it into a drawer, turned off the light, and whispered to myself, "Patience isn't weakness. It's strategy." And somewhere deep down, I knew This wasn't just the end of a fight. It was the beginning of freedom. Winning custody didn't feel like victory. It felt empty. I thought there'd be fireworks, relief, a sense of finality. But instead, there was silence, the kind that hums in your ears when the noise finally stops. For 3 years, my life had revolved around fighting Jake. Every day, every decision, every breath was part of that war. Now the battlefield was gone, but the wounds were still there. I'd wake up some mornings and still check my phone for his messages, expecting the next manipulation, the next threat. And when it wasn't there, I didn't feel peace. I felt strange, like a soldier who forgot what it meant to stand still. Emily, though, she changed first. Within weeks, she started laughing more. Real, belly-deep laughs that filled the apartment. She began drawing pictures again, me, her, the cat we'd adopted. Sometimes she'd draw Jake too, but always far away, standing behind a fence or a wall. One evening, while we were baking cookies, she said something that froze me. "Mommy, when Daddy yells, the air feels heavy. But your house smells like cookies." I didn't know what to say. I just hugged her tight and whispered, "It'll always smell like cookies here, okay?" That night, I sat by her bed and realized she wasn't the only one learning how to breathe again. A few weeks later, Alyssa called. She'd left him for good. The police had a restraining order against Jake after he tried showing up at her job. "He's unraveling," she said. "He thought he could scare me, but I recorded everything. I learned that from you." That hit me harder than I expected. From me. I used to think my story was just pain, but maybe it was also a warning. A blueprint for survival. We talked for hours that night. 2 women who'd both loved the same man and paid the price for it. There was no bitterness left in me anymore, only empathy. She told me she was seeing a therapist, rebuilding. I told her I was trying to do the same. That conversation made me realize something. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It's 2 women healing in separate houses while the man who broke them both learns he can't control anyone anymore. One afternoon, I got an email from Denise. Final custody confirmation signed and sealed. Case closed. 2 words jumped out. Case closed. I read them over and over, like I didn't quite believe them. Then I printed that email and pinned it above my desk. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder of endurance. The following week, Jake texted for the first time since the ruling. "I hope you're happy ruining my life." I stared at the message for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed back, "No, I'm happy living mine." And I meant it. Life started feeling normal again in small ways. I went back to work full-time. Emily made new friends. We planted flowers on the balcony, petunias her favorite. But every now and then, when I'd walk past the courthouse or see a man in a navy suit with that same fake smile, my stomach would twist. Trauma doesn't disappear, it lingers, waiting in the corners. Still, I refused to let it own me anymore. I joined a support group for women who'd been through custody battles. The first time I spoke, my voice cracked. But by the 3rd meeting, I could tell my story without shaking. At the end of one session, a woman named Laura hugged me and said, "Hearing you gives me hope." That's when I realized, maybe that's what healing looks like. Not pretending it never happened, but using it to help someone else survive their own storm. One night, I sat by the window after putting Emily to bed. The city was quiet, streetlights flickering against the rain. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel haunted by what Jake had done. I just felt grateful. Grateful for Denise. For my sister. For Alyssa. For every woman who refused to stay silent. Because patience wasn't just my revenge, it was my rebirth. I'd lost years, but I'd found myself again. And as I closed my eyes that night, I whispered into the dark, "You can't destroy a woman who's learned to rebuild herself." I wish I could say Jake disappeared quietly after that. But men like him rarely fade away. They linger, like smoke after a fire. At first, it was little things. Missed drop-offs. Late payments. Short, passive-aggressive texts that said things like, "Emily seems confused lately. Are you sure you're doing what's best for her?" He knew exactly which words would sting. I ignored most of it, forwarding anything relevant to Denise. But when he started showing up at Emily's school by accident, I knew I couldn't just brush it off. The principal called one morning. "Miss Turner, your ex-husband was here again. He said he was early for pickup, but it was 2 hours before dismissal. I thought you should know." I thanked her, hung up, and sat there in silence. My coffee went cold. Jake wasn't trying to win Emily anymore. He was trying to remind me he still existed. That night, I filed for a restraining order. Denise helped fast-track it. The judge didn't even hesitate. "Mr. Turner has demonstrated concerning behavior," she said. "The protection order will stand." I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. 2 days later, I woke up to a flurry of Facebook notifications, tags, comments, messages. Jake had made a post. A long, manipulative essay about how the system destroys good fathers, and some women use their children as weapons. He even posted a photo of Emily and me, taken years ago when we were still a family. The caption read, "I just want to see my little girl again." The comments flooded in, people who didn't know the truth, calling me selfish, cruel, ungrateful. My hands trembled as I read them. I wanted to scream, to reply to every stranger who had no idea what I'd survived. But Denise told me not to engage. "Let him dig his own grave," she said. "He's showing the world who he really is." She was right. Within days, Alyssa posted her own story. Not dramatic, not emotional, just facts. Screenshots, recordings, photos of the restraining order. Then, one by one, others began commenting. Old co-workers, neighbors, people who'd seen glimpses of his temper. By the end of the week, Jake had deleted the post. His perfect image was cracking publicly now, not just in court. That same weekend, Emily asked me, "Why doesn't Daddy smile anymore?" I didn't know how to explain it to a 7-year-old. So I said, "Sometimes when people lie for too long, they forget how to smile for real." She nodded like she understood. Kids always understand more than we think. Months passed. The order kept him away, at least legally. I focused on work, on rebuilding a life that didn't revolve around fear. But one evening, when I was walking to my car after a late shift, I felt it, someone watching. That primal instinct that makes your skin crawl. I turned around. He was standing across the street, hands in his pockets, just staring. No words, no movement, just watching. For a moment, the old fear returned. My body froze, my breath caught. Then something shifted. I wasn't the same woman he used to intimidate. I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo, and dialed 911. He saw me do it, and left. The police called him the next day. Warned him. Said the next time it would mean jail time. That was the last time I saw him in person. Weeks later, I received a letter from the court. Jake had moved states, filed for relocation employment, and closed his parental visitation rights until further notice. He was gone. No goodbye, no closure. Just gone. And in that silence, I realized how peace actually sounds. It's not joyful or loud. It's still. It's ordinary. It's waking up and realizing you don't have to check over your shoulder anymore. That night, I made hot cocoa for Emily and me. She sat on the couch with her blanket, watching cartoons. "Mommy," she said softly, "do you still love Daddy?" I looked at her for a long moment. "I don't hate him," I said honestly. "But I don't love the person he chose to be." She thought about that, then smiled. "Then maybe you just love you now." That one sentence broke me in the best way possible. I pulled her close and whispered, "Yeah, maybe I finally do." There's a strange quiet that follows years of chaos. At first, it doesn't feel like peace. It feels like something's missing. For months after Jake moved away, I'd still wake up at 3 a.m., heart racing, expecting a fight that wasn't coming. I'd reach for my phone, check my messages, brace for another threat that never arrived. That's what trauma does. It trains your body to live in survival mode, even when the war is over. But slowly, the silence started to feel different. Softer. Kinder. I filled it with new things. Morning walks with Emily before school, fresh flowers on the kitchen table, laughter that didn't sound forced anymore. I even started going to therapy. The first session was awkward. I sat there, arms crossed, giving short answers like I was being interviewed for a job I didn't want. But by the third visit, the therapist, Dr. Cruz, said something that stuck with me. "Sarah, you've spent years fighting to prove you were a good mother. But when was the last time you did something just to be you?" That question hit harder than any court battle ever had. Because I didn't know the answer. So I started small. I took a pottery class. Signed up for yoga. I even went to dinner alone one Friday night. A tiny restaurant by the pier where nobody knew me. I remember sitting there, staring at the waves, realizing how strange it felt to eat without guilt, without someone criticizing the way I spoke or what I ordered. That night, I didn't cry. I smiled. Because for the first time in years, I was living without defending myself. Emily was thriving too. Her teacher said she'd become more confident, more talkative. She joined a little art club at school and came home with paint all over her clothes, proudly announcing, I made you something. It was a clay heart, crooked, messy, but perfect. On it, she'd written, "Me plus mom equals brave." I kept it on my nightstand. It reminded me that maybe healing wasn't about forgetting the pain, but learning to see the beauty that came after it. A few months later, Alyssa reached out again. She'd started volunteering at a women's shelter. "I tell them your story sometimes," she said. "Not your name, just what you did. How you waited. How you fought back the smart way." I didn't know how to respond. My throat tightened. All I could say was, "Tell them it's possible." She laughed softly. "I already do. It's strange how the people who were once part of your pain can become part of your healing." We didn't talk often, but there was a quiet understanding between us, like two soldiers who'd fought the same war on different fronts. Then one night, out of nowhere, Jake called. His number flashed on my screen, and for a moment, I just stared at it. My hands didn't shake this time. I just felt curious. I answered. He sounded different. Weaker. Smaller. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he said. "For everything." The words hung there, heavy and hollow. I didn't know if he meant them, and honestly, it didn't matter anymore. "I forgive you," I said quietly. "But not for you, for me." He was silent for a while. Then he whispered, "She must hate me." "No," I said. "She doesn't hate you. She just doesn't need you to be her hero." There was another pause. Then he said, "You sound happy." "I am," I replied. "Finally." And just like that, the call ended. No shouting. No manipulation. Just closure. Simple, clean, and overdue. That night, after I hung up, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and realized something important. I'd spent years believing revenge would feel like triumph. But it didn't. It felt like peace. True revenge wasn't seeing him punished. It was seeing myself free. As I watched the city lights shimmer through the rain, I whispered to myself. I fought 3 years for custody, but what I really won was my life back. And for once, that felt like enough.
Healing doesn't happen all at once. It comes in waves, small, unexpected ones that sneak up on you when you least expect it. Like the morning I woke up to the smell of pancakes and realized Emily was standing on a stool in the kitchen, trying to flip them herself. She turned around, flour on her nose, and said, "I wanted to make you breakfast because you always make mine." I laughed so hard I nearly cried. For so long, my mornings had started with anxiety, checking court emails, rehearsing testimonies in my head, bracing for the next crisis. Now they started with pancakes and giggles. That was when I knew we were finally living again. Not surviving. Living. My therapist once told me, "You've been conditioned to anticipate disaster. That's why peace feels uncomfortable." She was right. For months, I'd catch myself waiting for the next blow, even though there wasn't one coming. I'd keep checking my phone after putting Emily to bed, half expecting a new email from Jake or some legal notice. But nothing came. The silence became comfortable. A kind of safety I'd forgotten existed. Work got better too. I was promoted to assistant manager at the bank, a position I'd once dreamed about before everything fell apart. My boss, Linda, said, "You've got a resilience most people never develop. You keep your cool no matter what." I smiled, thinking if only you knew. But I didn't explain. I didn't know my pain and audience anymore. Emily was growing fast, too fast. She'd started writing little stories about supermoms who could fix anything with hugs and cookies. Her teacher said she wanted to be a writer. I told her she already was one. One night, while reading her a bedtime story, she suddenly said, "Mommy, do you think people change?" I paused. "Sometimes. But they have to want to." She thought for a moment, then nodded. "I think Daddy's trying." That caught me off guard. Jake had started sending postcards every few months, simple ones. Short notes like, "Tell Emily I'm proud of her," or "I hope you're both doing well." At first, I wasn't sure what to do with them. I didn't want to reopen old wounds. But I decided to keep them in a box for her, something she could read when she was ready. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over poison. By spring, everything felt lighter. I'd even started dating again, nothing serious, just dinners and walks with a man named Chris. He was gentle, kind, patient. He never pushed when I hesitated, never demanded explanations for the walls I'd built. One evening, while we were watching a movie, he asked, "Do you ever think about the past?" I smiled faintly, only to remind myself how far I've come. He nodded. "Then I hope someday you stop looking back entirely." That line stayed with me. Not because it hurt, but because it gave me something to aim for. By summer, I stopped counting how long it had been since the last court date, the last email, the last time I saw Jake. I'd built a new rhythm: morning coffee, school drop-offs, real laughter, quiet evenings. I didn't realize how much I'd changed until one night when Emily tripped and spilled juice all over the carpet. 3 years ago, that small accident would have sent me spiraling, afraid, tense, defensive. But that night, I just smiled, handed her a towel, and said, "It's okay, sweetheart. Let's clean it up." She looked at me and said softly, "You didn't yell." And that's when it hit me. Jake had left scars deeper than I thought, even on her. But every gentle response, every calm moment, was rewriting those old patterns. That was the real revenge. Not anger, not punishment. Reprogramming the pain until it no longer ruled us. One evening, as I tucked Emily in, she said, "You're my favorite person in the whole world." I smiled. "Why?" "Because you never gave up," she said. And that broke me, in the best way possible. All those years of courtrooms, lies, humiliation, waiting, documenting. It wasn't just about winning custody. It was about proving to her, and to myself, that we were stronger than the man who tried to break us. That night, I sat alone on the balcony, the city quiet beneath me. The air was cool, clean. And for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of the past. Just gratitude. Because sometimes surviving is the victory. It was a Sunday morning, quiet, sunny, and unremarkable. But sometimes healing doesn't announce itself with big moments. It sneaks in disguised as peace. Emily and I were at the park. She was running barefoot through the grass, chasing bubbles, her laughter floating through the air. I sat on the bench, coffee in hand, watching her like it was the first time I'd ever seen her happy. Maybe in a way, it was. For years, I'd imagined this moment. Not the court victory, not the apology call, but this, her laughter unshadowed, my heart steady. No fear, no anticipation of what could go wrong. Just being there. A little boy tripped near her, scraping his knee. Emily helped him up, told him it was okay, then ran to his mom. "He's fine," she said proudly. The woman smiled at me and said, "You've got a kind kid." And I said the truest thing I'd ever spoken. She learned from the hard way. Later that day, as we were leaving, I saw a familiar face. Alyssa, standing near the fountain, holding hands with a small girl of her own. She saw me too. We exchanged a quiet smile, no words needed. That one look said everything. We made it. Two women who had once lived in fear now standing in sunlight, surrounded by the proof that the cycle could be broken. That night, after Emily fell asleep, I pulled out the old notebook, the record. It had been sitting in my drawer for months, untouched. The cover was worn, pages filled with handwriting that looked like another person's story. I flipped through it slowly. The notes from those first hearings. Descriptions of bruises. Screenshots of messages that used to make my blood run cold. And then, I closed it. I didn't need it anymore. That notebook had saved me once. But now it was just a relic of a life I'd already outgrown. So I walked to the backyard, lit the fire pit, and dropped it in. Page by page, it burned, quietly, cleanly, without drama. And as I watched the smoke rise into the night sky, I whispered, "You don't owe me anymore." It wasn't about Jake. It was about the version of myself who had lived in fear. The woman who'd begged for peace, who'd doubted her worth, who'd thought survival was the best she could hope for. I wasn't her anymore. After the fire died down, I went back inside. The house was still, warm, alive with little reminders of the life I'd built. Emily's drawings on the fridge, the smell of vanilla candles, the soft hum of her nightlight down the hall. I stood there for a long time, taking it all in. This was my justice, my closure, my peace. Jake never went to jail. He never faced public humiliation beyond his own undoing. But that didn't matter, because his punishment wasn't losing me. It was realizing I no longer cared. Months later, Emily's school hosted a family day. Parents were invited to share stories about what made their families special. When it was her turn, she stood at the front of the room and said, "My mom's the strongest person I know. She fought for me. And she won." The room went quiet for a second, then everyone clapped. I smiled, blinking back tears. Not from pain, but pride. That little girl would grow up knowing what strength looked like, not in anger, not in revenge, but in quiet perseverance. So yes, I fought 3 years for custody while he lived like nothing happened. Every hearing felt like torture. Every lie felt like a wound I had to carry. But in the end, I learned something he never did. That patience, when fueled by love and truth, becomes its own kind of revenge. Because I didn't just win custody. I won my freedom. I won my peace. I won myself. If you were in my shoes, would you have waited? Would you have fought like I did, or walked away sooner? Tell me what you think in the comments. And don't forget to follow for more real stories like this, because sometimes surviving is the bravest thing we ever do.